In this video, we're going to look at how to use the graphing calculator to graph polynomials. And as always, I've got a TI-84 plus CE, but a lot of what I say will work with any graphing calculator. Now I've got a polynomial all ready to get started with. So as always to graph, let's hit y equals, and let's type in our function. Here's my x button next to alpha. Again, for the exponent, I usually hit the caret key, so x cubed, and make sure to hit right down there, plus x. Now you can use that for square. I'm more commonly just going to hit the square button over here on the left. Subtract 7x, subtract 7. Again, make sure to hit subtraction and not the negative sign, because that's the same as multiplying by a negative number. And let's start by hitting graph, just to get an idea of visually what this looks like. Now, sometimes our graph fits nicely on the screen, sometimes it doesn't. Here, I've got some term down here which I can't quite see. So, as always, if we want to adjust that, we can go to the window. Now, there's really just the one part that I couldn't see. That would be going down on y. I've currently got it at -10. Let's try -15. Sometimes I just like to play around with those settings and see what works best. So let's try hitting graph and see if I can now see the entire thing. And for this one, I was able to. So sometimes we might have to play around with it a little bit, but for this one, I was able to change that pretty easily. Now, a couple of the things that we like to look at when finding polynomials are first the zeros. So let's start by looking at zeros. Now again, the zeros are where we're crossing the x-axis, so I can at least use my graph to approximate some of those. Looks like I do have a nice one at -1, but those other two are not such nice numbers. That's somewhere between 2 and 3, and that one is somewhere between -3 and -2. So probably not integers. I'm pretty confident about that. Let's start by going to our table. So that's in blue, and as always, to get the blue stuff, I'm going to hit second first. So let's hit second graph and pull up my table. Now again, a 0 is where I cross the x-axis, so I'm looking for anywhere that my y value is a 0. And if I scroll down here, I can see a y value, so I definitely have -1 as one of my zeros. And I was able to find that particular 0 pretty easily. Now again, I said I should have one somewhere between -3 and -2, and between 2 and 3, but this is only giving me integers on the x. So because it wasn't an exact value, I can't see that on my table. Let's go back to my graph. Now I have another video that will cover this more thoroughly, but to approximate zeros, let's go to the calc menu. So second trace to approximate. So let's hit second calc, and I'm looking for zeros, so let's pick option 2 there. Now we're going to have to do these one at a time, so I'm going to start with that leftmost 0. So let's take my cursor till I am somewhere to the left of it, and you'll notice I do also have values down here if I'm having trouble seeing it. So let's hit there, and I do get a line to help me see it. And then let's move my cursor until we're to the right. Now, especially if you've got a narrow graph where it can be hard to tell, I'm going to use those values to help me out. The previous one, I had a -x value, whereas by now I have a positive x value. That means at some point, I should have crossed that x-axis. I'm sorry, y value, not x value. And let's hit enter again. Now again, for guess, you can try to get close. You don't actually have to. I can just leave that cursor, so I'm going to hit enter. And it looks like I have approximately -2.6458. Again, we have to do these one at a time. So to find that last one, let's go to second calc again, pick 0. And now for the left bound, I'm doing this one. So let's get over here, so I'm past that. And then let's make sure I am on the other side. I just went past my 0 there, so I should be good. And hit enter. So it looks like my final 0 here is going to be about 2.6458. So again, I have a video on finding zeros using that second trace in more detail, but for now, I can definitely do that to approximate these values. One of the other things that we'd like to know are finding turning points, which are also called extrema. I am going to go to that calc menu again. So let's hit second and trace. So here I'm looking for either a minimum or a maximum. Let's go ahead and do minimum first. It doesn't really matter which one we do first. So I'm picking minimum. And once again, it's going to be asking me for the bounds. Now, the minimum is this, not this. So let's make sure we are somewhere to the left of that. And let's hit enter. And then somewhere to the right of that. And just like our other options, it will then ask me to guess. But as always, I don't actually have to move that cursor. I can just leave it as is and hit enter. And it looks like my minimum is at about 1.2301. As always, we are given that y value as well. Usually for this level of class, I'm not as concerned with that y value, but I certainly am given it if I need it. So similarly, if I would like to find the maximum, let's once again go to the calc menu. So second trace. This time I'm looking for the max, so let's hit 4. And once again, I need to be to the left, so there's my maximum. Let's make sure I am to the left. That should be far enough. Let's hit enter. And then I need to be to the right, so let's go until I'm to the right, hit enter. And again, for guess, don't really need to move that cursor, so let's hit enter again. And it looks like my maximum is at about negative 1.8968. Now, for this one, for two of my zeros and both of my min and max, these are not nice values. As a reminder, if these are numbers particularly with radicals, which is the case for all of these, then my calculator will not give me that exact radical answer. I will only be able to get these decimal approximations.